The U.S. government has very specific laws on how you pay your team in the form of wage and hour laws. And the easiest way for you to determine how best to follow these laws is worker classification. And specifically here today, we're going to talk about employees versus independent contractors, typically referred to as contractors. You're going to want to be aware of what your requirements are in the wage and hour and employees versus contractor space so you stay out of hot water. Hi, I'm HR and operations strategist Angelique Lucas. Welcome to my YouTube channel, HR on Call, where I break down HR best practices and U.S. compliance laws into actionable steps to implement into your online small business. Since we've been talking about HR compliance, I want to spend a bit of time talking about worker classification, specifically employees versus contractors, although classification goes well beyond these two high-level buckets. When we're talking about HR compliance and worker classification, specifically employees and contractors, I want you to be aware that this isn't a choice or a preference that you or your new team member get to make. Whether or not a team member in your business is an employee or an independent contractor is very easily based on whether or not you as the business owner have control over just the result of the work that they're doing, or more control over when, how, and where they do that work. Now, if I haven't mentioned it already, the most complicated aspect of HR compliance and employment and labor laws is that they change all the time. I mean, I'm recording this in December of 2024, and just this year alone, in the last 6 months, we've had more than a dozen changes to laws that were put in place and then reversed. And in addition to that, we're coming into a period in January of 2025 where a new U.S. administration will take office, and we're likely going to see some changes to employment and labor laws that were put into effect this year or previous years. One of those specifically is around the rules around what an independent contractor is. President Donald Trump in 2021 made an order that it was essentially based on the level of control, which we just talked about. And then earlier this year, in March 2024, the current administration, President Biden, changed that order and then made it so that there are 6 factors that you need to consider when you are looking at an independent contractor in your business versus classifying them as an employee. I will put those 6 factors below so that you have them, but just keep in mind that these 6 factors are based on the current administration in the US, and as of January 2025, there's a good chance that that will adjust. So stay tuned and sign up to my email list, which you can find on my website at angeliquelucas.com, where I share compliance updates as and when they come. I want to try and keep this as simple and as uncomplicated as possible for you. So if you are bringing in a new team member to your team and you're trying to decide between employee and independent contractor, just know that whichever administration is in office, whether this is 2024, 2025, or 2035, most often assume that the government is going to default to you having an employee in your business, even though I would absolutely recommend that you have an independent contractor in your business starting out as an online small business. The reason why I say that is because of the factors in how you manage employees versus contractors, which we'll get into in just a minute, is going to be a lot easier for you starting out. You can figure out how you work with this team member, how they do their job, how well you like them doing their job, and then decide whether or not you'd like to keep them long term. What I mentioned before, the government is likely going to assume that you're going to bring employees into your business. And it's really up to you as the business owner to say, I don't have control over XYZ, so they are an independent contractor in my business. If you can stick to that, where you have only control over the results of the work that is being delivered by the team member who is in your business, then you can absolutely be worry-free in knowing that you've got an independent contractor. If you are trying to manage anything else about the work that they do, how they do their work, where they do their work, and when they do their work, then you're going to have an employee. And the reason why the government defaults to considering your business having employees is because as an employer, you're going to be more responsible for things like withholding taxes. You're going to be responsible for offering benefits and a couple of other things. But because you are more responsible for those aspects, if you aren't trying to manage how, where, and when your team member is doing the work that they are responsible for in your business, then you have an independent contractor. And an independent contractor is going to be less of a lift, let's say, and less responsibility for you as the employer than if they were an employee. And we're going to go through a couple of things that you need to be aware of in terms of the difference between employees versus contractors once you have correctly classified them, and then how you manage them in an ongoing basis. When it comes to onboarding employees versus contractors, the big difference is the paperwork that you collect and the document that you offer to confirm placement in your business. For employees, you're going to offer an offer letter, which has very specific information based on the state that that employee is going to be based in or working in, that will determine what is included in the offer letter. But it's basic things like how much you're going to pay them, how often you'll pay them, whether the role is exempt or non-exempt, whether or not they're full-time or part-time, whether or not they're hourly paid or salary paid. All of these things, when they start, what their title is, all of those good things. The difference in a contractor is going to be a contractor agreement or an independent contractor agreement. Right? So that's really going to be either you issue them a contractor agreement for being a contractor in your business, or because they will essentially be their own business, they may issue you their contractor agreement and it says you are their client and what they will be producing or delivering or the services that they are offering to you as you are their client. The other thing is information that you want to collect. When you're onboarding an employee, you want to be collecting your Form W-4, which is your federal tax form. You want to be collecting a state tax form. That's different for every state, depending on where the employee is located. And then you want to be filling out and completing a Form I-9, which is the authorization to work in the U.S. For contractors, you only need to collect a Form W-9. This is a form that you collect from your contractor that they have filled out and they would give to any of the businesses that are their clients. And it says information about their business, and this is going to help you issue them a form at the end of the tax year. Now, speaking of end of tax year, this is the other thing that is different. For ongoing work, end of tax year, for an employee, you're responsible for issuing a W-2. That's why you'll often hear an employee referred to as a W-2 worker or a W-2 employee, because that's the tax document that says how much you paid them as an employee in your business in a particular tax year. You're still responsible for that for contractors, but it's not a Form W-2. It is a Form 1099, and it is only required for earnings that you have paid to your contractor over $600, technically $600 or more. Now, again, as compliance law changes, that number may change, but for now, it's at $600. And you can look that up online to see what that is every year. But every year, you as an employer with 1099 contractors in your business are required to issue a 1099, or for employees in your business, Form W-2. Both of those are due by January 31st of the following year for the tax year that they're being issued. The next aspect that you want to be thinking about is compensation, how you're paying your employees and your contractors. Depending on what the pay frequency is in your business, it's likely going to be different for employees versus contractors. For example, for employees, whether or not they're salary or hourly or they're full-time or part-time, you're likely going to be paying every 2 weeks, once a month, twice a month. That's a typical pay frequency for most businesses, one of those three. Versus contractors, it may be you pay them every week, every 2 weeks, every month, but it's based on either an hourly rate or it's a retainer. So a retainer for compensation with contractors could be, I deliver these services every month in your business, and in return, you pay me this monthly retainer fee. I give you this list of services, you give me this one-time payment once a a month. It could be that you pay them every week for a certain amount of hours. And in the contractor agreement, you would outline what it is that you're paying them and how often. The next big thing is performance. With employees, as I said earlier, you have control over how, where, and when they do work. For contractors, you only control the result, which means you don't get to talk about performance when it comes to your contractors. Now, it doesn't mean that if they're doing a crap job, you can't tell them. But what it does mean is that how you tell them is, this is what our contractor agreement states. I'm going to give you this amount of money and you give me these deliverables. These 20 hours managing my community, these 10 hours responding to my employee queries, or what have you on a weekly, monthly basis. And you're only getting to 10 hours out of the 20 or 7 out of the 10, or you're not getting the response time back that I've requested. So let's say you have a contractor who is a community manager in your online small business. And so they're responsible for going into your community group, whether that's in Slack or Facebook or Circle or any of the other community-based platforms. And they are responsible for responding to questions, providing coaching to your community. If you have told them, and it's listed in your contractor agreement, that they will respond to queries, questions, what have you in the community within 24 hours, Monday through Friday, and they're getting to folks every 48 hours, that is a result that you absolutely can talk to them about and let them know that it's not happening. If they continue to not do it the way that is designed and outlined in the contractor agreement, you can let them go. Simply saying, here is the notice that I'm giving you as per our contractor agreement, and you both part ways. As long as you have the provided notice listed in your contractor agreement and you meet that provided notice on either side, the contractor can give you notice or you as the business owner can give the contractor notice. Either way, that needs to be clearly spelled out in your contractor agreement. And if they're not working up to the standards, the expectations, and the deliverables that they've outlined in that contractor agreement, you can let them go. Versus when we're talking about an employee, in the offer letter and in your onboarding process, you're going to be very clear in the form of a job description what it is that you expect from them, when they need to be at meetings, what hours of the day and the week they need to be working, when they need to be showing up for the community, when they need to be showing up for your internal team, when they need to be meeting with you as the business owner. All of these things are outlined in the job description, in your employee onboarding materials, all of those things. And if you come to a point where your employee, again, whether full-time, part-time, salary, or hourly, is not meeting the expectations that you've clearly set up in your onboarding process and through your job description that you've gone out when you were hiring for this person, if they're not meeting those needs, you absolutely can have those discussions on a regular and consistent basis to say where things are not being met. But here's the thing. If it is a regular and consistent conversation that you're having with this person about them not meeting expectations of the job, then it's time to get into performance improvement plans, which is when you're talking about where they are versus where they need to be and the gap in between those 2 points that they need to fill in. You're going to do a little bit of work to try and help get them there. They're going to do a big portion of the work to get themselves there. And if after giving them enough time to reasonably make the improvements and they haven't, then and only then can you start to talk about letting go of an employee in your business. But there are a lot of rules around letting go employees. And while the big myth is we have a lot of states in the US with at-will employment, which basically means for no reason at all, I, as the employer, can let you, the employee, go with no notice and no reason. And vice versa, you as the employee can give me notice that you're leaving today and you're done working for me as the employer. And you don't need to give me a reason and you don't need to give me any notice. However, while at-will employment absolutely is just that, at any given time, an employee can say, I would like to raise a lawsuit against this employer because I don't think that I was let go for appropriate reasons. And then it's on you as the employer to clearly make the case for why you had a legitimate reason to let that employee go. Now, that is a different conversation for a different day, but I wanted to give you that when we're talking about employees versus contractors, because the at-will employment myth is real, folks. There are too many businesses, whether online or brick and mortar, that think the at-will employment law in various states is the catch-all. I don't need to have any reason and rationale. You don't, but it's better if you do. Stay tuned for the next video in our HR compliance series, the 5 most important labor and employment laws that you need to be aware of and how they apply to you and your business. See you then.